welcome to Adventures in Glass with Doug. That's me. I've put together a series of videos that will help you get inspired, maybe give you some tips and tricks to take thrifted glass, pieces that you might have that you don't know what else to do with and you're not really using, or they may be chipped or damaged, and you may even find some in grandma's attic, and you don't really know what to do with them, but you think maybe I should try something new. Well, I've got some ideas for you. Now, I'm strictly amateur. I've kind of fallen into this thanks to a friend who showed me some of this, and I'm going to share some of these ideas with you, so it might work for you. If you're a returning subscriber, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, and I'm having fun with this. So let's talk about some basics. Now, I've explained many times that basically what I'm doing is taking glass, plates, bowls, objects, and I'm gluing them together to create either a tabletop totem, a hanging totem, a fountain, a bird bath, just a glass sculpture that you could have out in the yard or inside. And it's really kind of simple. Once you pick out the pieces you want, you decide what you want to create. If you get yourself some 100% silicone, I use the GE. There is a link in my supplies list on the description that is reliable. You can try on some of these heavier, more difficult pieces. If you want to try using epoxy, you can certainly do that. I find that specific. I kind of recommend if you're doing a heavy hanging piece now that we might use that to attach the hook on that, because sometimes those hooks don't always stay put. Like 98% of the time they do, but I've had a couple that have decided, oh, that wasn't quite right, and they drop off. But I do use the silicone because that allows me to make repairs if I need to. You can use a razor and scrape it off and make some repairs if need be, and reconstruct some pieces, because accidents do happen. But certainly epoxy is a possibility too, if you're familiar with using that. So I recommend the 100% silicone. We're going to use that to glue our pieces together. We're going to do it a step at a time when we do it, to allow it to dry in between so you don't have things slipping and sliding. And we'll just go from there. Now, today's lesson is kind of by request. I had someone ask, well, gee, why don't you show us how to do some of those glass flowers? And I've done probably a dozen glass flowers in the past. And there are people who do a much better job of it than I do, who have their own videos posted. And so it's not something that I discovered on my own. I did watch some of those videos. And I'll put, if I can find them, I'll put their links in the description too, because there are some people, some who are subscribers to the channel, who are much better at this than I am. I will say that the flowers, to me, appear to be a little more complicated. If you're just starting out with this craft, they're a little bit more involved than some of the other things we do. And so, depending on your level of familiarity with doing glass, I'll show you how it's done, and I'll point out the one pitfall I find and the reason why I'm not as excited as I used to be about doing the glass flowers. Okay, so let me show you a couple examples of what I've done, and I'll kind of segue into where, for me, it's a bit of a problem area. All right, let's see. This one, for instance, actually is a reconstructed piece that had been knocked off of a wall that I had it hanging on. The green plate on the base and the bowl stayed intact. The item that was in the center of it broke off, and so I've replaced that. You might recognize that that is a fairly easy to come by thrifted piece that is like the end of a chandelier bulb or an overhead fan. You can usually find these quite frequently, and they look pretty good as the center of a flower. A lot of people will use egg plates, and when you find those, they also have the look of petals, and you can use an egg plate as your base and then build up from there. I'll explain a few other things about them. for the most part, my first flowers were fastened onto stakes. But I then moved to where I thought, well, gee, how could you do them so they could be fastened onto an outdoor wall or something? This is an example of one that I did that incorporates a plate, a bowl, another smaller candle holder, and a colorful shot glass. Those are always very interesting because they give you that trumpeted look in the center. Well, this one, in order, the pitfall that I have come up with is how exactly do you hang or fasten these to stand upright as a flower. For these that I was trying to hang on a wall, I was able to, and I'll explain how it is that there's a bolt in the middle of this, but I took a small hook from, I think from some chain that I had, and fashioned that so that that could hang, you could hang that on something on the wall. Well, the problem is that because your base area often isn't exactly flat, or you might have it on a wall that has slanted shingles, it was difficult to get these to hang exactly straight. Most of the time they kind of tilted forward. I tried fastening them a little higher up, thinking that might work. I think maybe this was one that I had done that way. No, I ended up putting a hook on the back of this one too. But the problem again was, if that top part was going to be flat, your flower wasn't going to sit exactly right. I suppose if you had a really heavy-duty plate hanger, the type that have clips on 3 sides and usually have a heavy-duty spring attached to them, you might be able to use a plate hanger to hang it. If you've ever tried to do anything like that at home, you know how tricky it is to get the plate to hang flat against the wall. So I have tried fashioning these little hooks on the back to be able to hang these, and I've been moderately successful with that. But the way that most people will do these is on a garden stake, much like this one is. So let me tell you how the types of stakes I've used and some of the good and bad about that. This is PVC, fairly sturdy piece of PVC. This is not a very long one because I didn't want this flower sitting out, up too high. That's fastened because in this case I was using bolts through the plate. Again, I'll explain that part to you. So fasten that on the back. Well, the problem is sometimes that gets loose enough to where, okay, I'm not sure I really want to have a spinning flower. But it did work for that one. In a similar fashion, I had a few others on PVC stakes. You can see they were bolted through. I lost probably 4 or 5 of these flowers when I had the totem smash. The video will show you when I had a big pine tree come down and kind of smash through a lot of my glass. So I have just the stakes left after these got broken off. I did try using some smaller PVC. Well, this is actually the gray pipe that is used for a lot of times for electrical conduit. Not as strong, a lot more flexible. And while I think this is one that had gotten hit from the tree, even so, I've had some of these bend because the weight of the plates was too heavy and they didn't stay upright. I've used longer than this, but wooden stakes, drilled through those. They're okay. Sometimes you've got some weathering issues with that, or they might split if you're not careful. Those are all some interesting ways. Now, there are some folks who have posted that they will use these PVC elbows to fasten onto the back of the last plate, so that then you can set those on another piece of either PVC or a wooden dowel, or more commonly copper pipe. You can get copper elbows and mount those on and have it sit on those. I've seen that done. If you want to spend the money for copper, I really don't want to throw a whole lot extra money into these projects. So they will work, but again, I think the the weak link in all of that is, how do you get this to fasten securely on the back? Now, this one previously had, before it got broken, did have a bolt through it. If you were going to be doing that, and by the way, this is an example of the inner part of a flower. The outer bowl or plate got broken off, and so I was able to cut through the silicone and salvage this part of it. So it's kind of waiting for the next step. The problem is I've got the bolt there, so if I want to reuse that, I either take off the dish that's in front of it and remove that, use a cutoff wheel to cut that off, or go ahead and drill through the next plate. That can be done, okay? What you would do is drill a hole through a plate, and it can be done. I've done it, but it's tricky. And use a bolt, probably something, a machine bolt that's probably got a little bigger head than this, but run that through your plate. You're going to use, depending on your setup, you're probably going to need, that's probably more washer than you would need, but you need a washer behind it, and then at some point you're going to have another washer in front of it. You might, depending on how you're setting all this up, you might have to, if you're going from inside to outside, you want to have this then fastened securely on your plate. You can use a regular nut or a wing nut on there. I got a little deep into the mechanics of it, but essentially that's what you're trying to do, is to wedge. And again, I would probably, what I've done in the past is, sorry, I don't have a plate, a little hole in it here to show you, but I would fasten with another nut here against the plates, and then go through my stake and fasten the stake to it. That would be, you know, how you're doing this. So once you have your plates fastened, then you're going to fasten it to the stake. Not impossible to do. But the more difficult part of that is drilling through your plate. And it would really depend on the piece that you're using on the back. Some of these platters are pretty thick. And now I think when I first did it, I drilled through, for instance, this, it would be like this bowl and this plate. So those two were fastened that way. I probably drilled, same thing, drilled through this bowl and this plate to secure them together. In order to drill through glass, you're going to need to get some diamond tipped drill bits. And there are several. I don't know if I've put them on the description. I will for this video, trying to put the source on the description. But your diamond tipped drill bits will allow you to push through the glass. You can use a regular drill. I've used a Dremel for that because I felt as though I could control the push a little bit more. Okay, cautions with that. I'm not going to be doing that for you today, but what you want to do, first of all, make sure you have safety glasses. You have an understanding of what you're going to cut. You're going to put your drill bit in, okay? You're going to, when you go to drill it in, you're going to try to stay as steady and vertical as possible. If you start wavering around, chances are you're going to crack the glass or chip it. The other part of that is you want to make sure you've got some water in your dish, or you have the whole thing inside a pan or a plastic wash bucket if you can, and because that's going to help you keep the temperature of the bit down a little bit. So you would be using it down through the glass, not a whole lot of pressure. You'll realize that what seems to be right, whether it's working or not. You'll actually see the glass cloud up a little bit in the glass sawdust, if you will, cloud up in the water, so you know you're doing progress. But don't force it. Just go gently down through it till you've completely gone through. And it may be on that last rotation, sometimes it will catch and spin your plate too, so you have to be careful of that. That's the tricky part of all of this, and I don't necessarily recommend drilling through the glass, because the other part of that is if you're not careful and you break through and hit with a drill too hard, chances are you may be cracking or splitting. And I've had that happen to me. I've had a vase completely break apart because I smashed down into it once the hole was drilled. It can be done, but I'm not necessarily an expert in that. And please go check out some of the other videos where folks do drill through the glass, so you get a good idea of what you're in for if that's what you want to do. Okay, I know some of you are probably hoping I was going to go completely start to finish with a glass flower, and I really don't have all the right pieces to make that happen. But let me show you a couple of possibilities, and you can kind of take it from there. These two pieces already were fastened together and salvaged from a broken one. What you could do in this situation is, and what I've done, is to simply silicone connect the plates together like I do with my other constructions and build up from there. You still are going to have to come up with some way to fasten on the back, as I've said before, somehow getting a connector on the back here that would allow you to drop it on a peg or something of that sort. And it's possible that could happen with silicone. I think I would probably use the epoxy in that situation to make sure it really got on sturdy. Okay, so just showing you some layered ideas. That's one possibility, a large glass, clear glass plate, another one with some color and something in front of that. Now you could add to that with another little dish that you might find. You could, this is kind of a cool piece that might work. A little votive in the center. Keeping in the color range, you could simply have put something like this little blue bean pot. You could even go crazy with, in this case, a martini glass. Put that in the center, and that's going to actually give you a whole lot of a center trumpet. Those are some possibilities. If, on the other hand, you wanted to go in another color range, I happen to... Another reason why I try and scoop up these plates when I see them. A red plate, again, a dish very similar to the other one we had, putting that in the center. And again, you can add in some color with some other small pieces. I think I would want something a little larger than the red plate that's here. I've got green, so you could put, again, I think that's a little small for this. It'd be nice if it has something a little larger. It has a trumpet. Well, let's see if you went with that. And then with that, a little shot glass here might work, or just there. If you didn't want the clear plate on the bottom, you could go, this happens to be one that I got at salvage. Let's take this under so you can see. You've actually got this nice orange one. You could put the green on top of that. I think you would need an in-between for that, maybe something like this. Possibly doing that, possibly doing that, possibly doing that. Each of these means you're just putting your silicone adhesive, attaching the plate, putting the silicone adhesive, attaching the plate, and as they dry, they should be fine. Again, it all comes down to how you attach on the back and how you get them to stand on a stake. Okay, well, I've decided that I probably should show you what it takes to drill through a plate. What I have is my Dremel, a diamond tip bit, which is going to cut like a little ring out of it. I have water, I have my safety goggles on, so let's see how this goes. Now, it wouldn't be a bad idea to mark your center with a Sharpie. In this case, the board that I have underneath it happens to have a hole right at the spot where I'm going to do the drill, so I can kind of have a use that as a guide. All right, here we go. I think I mentioned before that your plate isn't going to stay put as you get toward the end. So I don't know how well my tape is going to hold it. Let's try some more. And we're through. I think you'll see that we did make it through. We have our little chip that we took out, and of course a bunch of water. So we have drilled our hole through the plate, and we'll go about assembling the rest of it now. Okay, I hope you saw what we did there. We got our hole drilled through the glass. This was not a particularly thick piece of glass on this plate, so that was not that difficult. So the plan was to create a glass flower for the yard, but since I had part of one already assembled from one that had broken previously, I thought, well, let's start there. So I'll let you have a good close-up of that. This has like a shot glass in a blue dish in a larger dish, and I had previously drilled a hole through this dish and put the bolt through there. Now I'm not going to be able to have a firm grip on the bolt since it's buried inside, the head of it's buried inside there, but I think this will do. We've now drilled a hole through this plate, and that means we can assemble this. It's not a particularly fancy one because I don't have a lot of plates right now. If you had something of an interesting serving platter that you came across, or an egg plate, a lot of people use glass egg plates, that would have made it interesting too. But we just wanted to kind of salvage this piece by adding something behind it. What I might, just to add an extra layer of support and seal to this, I'm going to run a bead of silicone here on the matching surface. I had put some around the center, but it wasn't touching because it was concave. Okay, let's put the plate. Okay, so we have to properly finish this up, I'm going to use this piece of PVC that I have, gray pipe, because this doesn't really have much length to it, and I'm not sure it would make it through a 1-inch piece of pipe. Okay. So you would drill a hole through your support if you were doing it this way. Maybe put another washer behind it. And a nut, and get that tightened down. Now I can't really tighten this completely down because I can't get to the other end of this bolt. If you were doing this and you were going to fasten through a plate, you might want to do that before you finish putting the front pieces on, so that you had access to that, and then layer everything on top of that. Okay, let me review. One way of fastening these flowers to a post is by taking either a board or a piece of PVC pipe, drilling through it, and then drilling a hole in your plate, your base plate, and fastening that piece to the pipe probably before you built out the rest of your flower. So you could have that fastened snug to your pipe support, and then you would layer all the rest of your pieces on that. The other method I mentioned was taking an elbow or a T that's either copper or PVC that you can slip another post into, and fastening that on the back. You could, and if you didn't want to be drilling, you could use either epoxy or silicone to fasten that to the back. That to me is the critical point, and the thing that really I am not as excited about with these flowers, is because it's really tricky to do that final fastening step. I mean, I love making the flower itself, but getting that fastened to a post in a sturdy way is tricky. It means you have to cut through the glass and fasten. Anyway, you choose the method you want to do, what works for you, and I'll go show you what this looks like out in the garden. It's such a gorgeous day today that we have to do a little field trip to the backyard here. One of the things that this new house has are a couple of very large oak stumps, and I wasn't sure what to do with them. Well, turns out that's just a perfect spot for having a little cluster of my glass. In this case, I have some sunflowers, marigolds, and zinnias planted around it, so that should start looking really amazing soon.